Welcome to Scale Her Up, the Female Entrepreneurs Show with me, Brenda Hector. I'm a business growth specialist helping business owners to develop themselves and grow their businesses so they can achieve their goals and enjoy the lifestyle they dream of. I'm also on a mission to revolutionise the entrepreneurial landscape for women in business. In every podcast episode, I interview someone who has an inspiring story or some great advice for women aiming to start or scale their businesses. If you're new to the show, take a moment to subscribe and please check out the previous ones after listening to this. We've got an awesome community on Facebook. Just search for Scale Her Up and join in. I'm delighted to have Gillian Martin from the Scottish Government on the Scale Her Up podcast today. So really excited to have you here, Gillian, and to hear your story and your perspective on the challenges that are facing women business owners.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the promotion. I'm not in the Scottish Government, sadly. I'm in the party of government and I'm an MSP, but it's delightful that you promoted me to a ministerial post there. I appreciate it. Sadly, it's not the case.
My understanding of the terminology is obviously...
Yeah. I don't want anyone thinking I'm getting ahead of myself and accepting that. But I'm the MSP for Aberdeenshire East, and of course I'm in the party of government. I'm in the SNP, so it's people do sometimes think that you can change a lot more than you can, but you still can change quite a lot and influence quite a lot as a backbencher, which is what I am.
Okay, no, thank you for clarifying. There we go. Every day is a school day. I've learned the proper terminology as well. So thank you. So yeah, you have a history as a woman in business yourself. So do you want to just give us a bit of an introduction for the listeners to your background and your business story?
Sure. So my background, I've got sort of twin areas that I worked in throughout my career. One was in television and video production, but I also taught television production at college. So what I did is I was very relatively short amount of time full-time at college. I'd worked for a production company and then I moved into teaching when they were setting up what was called at that point the Multimedia Centre in then Aberdeen College, now North East Scotland College. And then I realised that I kind of wanted to keep on doing production myself, and I didn't want to be one of those people that were into education and then all of a sudden you find yourself you're teaching something that you haven't done for quite a long time yourself, particularly in a practical sense. It's very fast-moving technology in television production. So I think I was probably only about 2 or 3 months before I went part-time and I set up in business my own production company, which I would obviously run most of the week, and then I'd have a couple of days teaching students as well, which was delightful. And the majority of the things that I did when I had my own business were, as you would expect, in the Northeast, oil and gas related. So I did quite a lot of work with oil and gas companies and oil and gas service companies, particularly around sort of safety videos, induction videos, training videos, that kind of thing. So I was offshore quite a lot. But there was another strand to what I do. I ended up working with several people doing a lot of e-learning. So I would be writing courses for oil and gas, or anyone who needed a course, an online course. I would be working with people, scripting them. And I also had another strand to my bow. This is the thing when you're a one woman band, you just take any work that's coming. But I also worked in emergency media response because I do have a background in media training. I did quite a lot of media training, particularly for the large oil companies like Shell and BP, for the Aberdeen University. So I took that experience and I headed up a group of emergency responders who would respond to the media if anything happened. Say anything happened in the platform, or the many training exercises that the oil and gas service companies have to prepare for any kind of eventuality. So I did quite a lot of things, and that probably ran my business. I think I started it around about 2001. I think it was 2001. And I ran that as well as teaching up until I was elected.
I guess then the business had to close for you to be able to serve your your constituents and
Yeah, so I
yeah.
mean, I wound down my business probably within a week of being elected. Obviously, I let everyone, all of my clients know that I was going for election, with the caveat of I'll see you in the end of May if I haven't been successful in the election, but otherwise it's been great working with you, etc., etc. So you're never closing any doors. But everyone, I mean, I had some clients that I did quite a lot of business with, so they were all aware that I was going for election. So I sort of tapered off my work as it was coming to May. And of course, you know, when you're going for election, it's all consuming anyway. So I think I probably rounded off my final project, as it turned out to be, about late January that year, 2016.
There's quite a bit of work in an industry that's not so much known as being gender balanced, shall we say. So on offshore oil rigs, what was that like going off there as a female going into a very male dominated environment?
I'm genuinely good natured. I think because I was like contracted in. So I would always have my camera operator with me. So I used to work with various people who I was the director, and I would go with my sort of technical team, which tended just to be one person. So I was really sort of a visitor a lot of the time. I would maybe spending like a week at a time there. So I think there was a genuine respect for the fact that I wasn't working in the operation of a platform at all. I was there to do my job, and then I would leave, and I was always treated with extreme courtesy. But it is still a very male environment. I mean, it was I really thought that in the 20 odd years that I'd been doing production in that environment, that I would start to see more women in the kind of operational roles, and time would go past, decades would go past, and you would only really see women in the kind of more catering roles offshore or administration from time to time, with the odd exception. You know, you would see female engineers, but it didn't really seem to ever really turn into a more gender balanced place. And obviously it's been 5-6 years since I've been offshore. It's nice to think that it has changed. And certainly in the onshore area, there's a lot more women, which you can understand, I suppose, to a certain extent. I mean, not everyone has to go and work offshore who's involved in oil and gas, but maybe the work-life balance aspect of things for women in engineering lends them more to having those onshore jobs. And certainly, I guess it's more difficult for a mum, you know, with caring responsibility. Obviously, fathers get caring responsibilities too, but it is more difficult when, you know, you might have a role that takes you offshore, and you want to have family. That would become really difficult. I mean, one of the reasons that I did actually leave my production job to go to college was because I had a young son at the time, and I was spending an awful lot of time offshore making videos for them. But you know, within 6 months of leaving that, or less than 6 months, I was back doing it for myself anyway. So I think that actually probably speaks to more the fact that I wasn't enjoying making money for that company as an employee, and spending time away from my son. When I set up my own company, it certainly was a lot more attractive that I could do it in my terms. Yes. And that I could actually be remunerating myself more appropriately for spending time away from my young son and my husband.
And you won't be the first person that I've interviewed who tells a similar story, that they're willing to do more when it's their own business, and they want to have the control themselves rather than someone else be in control. That's
exactly. I mean, I was able to say, well, yes, I can do that then, or no, I can't do that then, and never having to explain. You know, I mean, it's just a case of like, this is my schedule, this is my diary. Yes, I can fit you in here and there, and no one even needs to know. It's because actually I don't want to work offshore this week because it's my son's birthday, or there's things happening in the school, or I want to spend more time at home. And you just never apologise, never explain. But when you work for someone else, you can't say that, can't turn things down.
Absolutely. I wonder if that's one of the messages that we need to be getting out there to women, that actually starting your own business gives you much more control of your work-life balance or harmony. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose there's two ways. I mean, on the one hand, setting up your business can be all consuming. Like you find yourself totally immersed in it, but it's your decision to do that. it takes away the kind of having to sort of work to somebody else's rules type aspect of things. But at the same time, setting up in business can be tremendously all consuming. And you do have to remember that you have to separate your work, particularly if you're working from home, your work from your home life as much as possible. And you have to be quite disciplined about that. But I guess, it's up to you to, but that first year when you're setting up, it can feel kind of all consuming because it's all on you. It's all on you to get the money and to get the business to start up in business. So I suppose there's pitfalls there. The thing that's behind it all is it's actually now your decision. It's not somebody else's.
Absolutely. Totally with you. However, now as a politician, you're acting on behalf of other people's wishes, I suppose, as a politician.
Yeah.
Is that?
But at the same time, you have got space to campaign on issues that are important to you, or that you have experience on, or that you know that your particular sections of your constituency that matter to you and them. One of the things that I very quickly got involved in is in Parliament, you have things called cross-party groups. And they're basically not the kind of Parliament business, but they're kind of like the kind of after Parliament business is over. You can convene groups that bring together people from across Scotland on particular subject areas. And the cross-party group that I convene is called Women in Enterprise. And I work with a group called Women's Enterprise Scotland, and we have run this cross-party group, or CPG as they're known, for 6 years now. So you do have an outlet for, I suppose, your own personal interest in something. Mm-hmm. But it has to have a link to it. It can't just be for your own sake. But one of the things I do feel very strongly about is that if we had as many women setting up in business as men every year, that the Scottish economy would be tremendously more healthy than it is right now, and that the lives of women would be financially an awful lot better. So I campaign along with Women's Enterprise Scotland, and I do this cross-party group every few months to be looking at the barriers to making that happen, and to be advocating on behalf of women in business to government and to anyone else who will listen, to get more assistance and to break down the barriers that are stopping that from happening. And it's been a tremendously successful cross-party group. And it's also, again, taking that aspect of what led me into politics, which is the improving the lives of women. I mean, I want to improve the lives of women and men and everyone in my constituency, of course. But I do feel that economically, women need more opportunities than they perhaps have had in the past.
So it's called the enterprise gap, isn't it? It's the gap in between women and men starting and scaling businesses. And that enterprise gap is larger in Scotland and the UK than it is in a number of other countries around the world.
Yes, it is.
And Europe as well. Why is that? What's the cause of that?
Well, I guess there's no one single cause, but if I can maybe make a comparison with some other, like maybe Northern European countries that are doing particularly well in this area, the enterprise gap in Scotland at the moment is worth 7.6 billion to the Scottish economy. If we had as many women setting up in business as men every year, there would be an injection to the Scottish economy of 7.6 billion pounds. And that's not just good for women, that's good for everyone, because that's more money going into our coffers, and that's more money, that we can use for running our public services. So if I take Norway for a comparator country, obviously Norway, small, independent, Northern European country, which is in control of all their aspects of their own economy. And what Norway did many years ago is that they decided to invest a great deal of money into providing universal childcare, which was free to every family. And I remember reading a very interesting interview with the then Norwegian Prime Minister, whose name escapes me right now. And it was in an American newspaper, and the American journalist asked him, what's the secret of Norway's economic success? And the journalist freely admitted in the article that she was expecting him to say oil and gas. Oh, we've got these natural resources and we export them, and that's why we've got a great pension fund, and that's why we've got a great and vibrant economy. But he didn't say that. He said the reason why Norway's economy is so buoyant is because we have more women working and paying in tax to our exchequer than any other European country, because we have given families free childcare. So women don't have this decision to make about coming back to work, or is it, do I stay at home with the child because it's actually less expensive for me than paying childcare costs, or do I go back to work and I'm paying childcare and I'm obviously almost cancelling out my salary? That is still something that happens in the UK and happens in Scotland. So you can look at something like that, a sort of social intervention like free childcare, free universal childcare, as an expense for the country. And I suppose in Scotland's case, it is an expense for the country because the income tax that is released by more women actually having free childcare and going back into the economy doesn't come all directly to the Scottish, and we don't have a treasury, it doesn't come to the Scottish government. But in Norway, because they're in control of all their finances, what might look like a cost of the expense of having free childcare for every single family, we have children of a preschool age, all the money that goes into the Norwegian exchequer for women now not having to have career breaks gets invested back into the country, comes into the Norwegian exchequer, pays for the childcare cost that the government is taking on. But over and above that, it doesn't just pay for that. It also means that they have got more income tax coming in generally. So it more than pays for it. In the Scottish context, the Scottish government have decided that they can afford to do 40 hours free childcare, but that's not universal free childcare, because of course that still is a cost for us to do that, because we're not seeing that economic benefit wholesale in coming back. So
there will be, I guess, I'm sure there are benefits in
there's huge benefits, and that's why we're doing it. And there'll be benefits that we'll be able to analyse in the future as that what a difference it's made, not just in terms of what it means for women in the economy, but also the improvement in the life chances of children who are getting that early years education. I always go back to that story of what the Norwegian Prime Minister said, because I think until that point, I mean, there's quite a lot of people I still speak to saying, free childcare, well, that's a massive undertaking for a government to take. Why would you do that? It would be far too expensive. And then I pull that example out of the hat and say, actually, it's not an expense.
It's an investment.
It's an investment. It's an investment in their children, and it's an investment for families, I suppose. But really, the people it benefits the most economically are women who don't have to pull themselves out of the workforce, or don't have to sort of slim down their business in order to realise the family life that they want. So I feel really passionately about these social interventions and looking at them as investments rather than costs, because the benefits that they can give society as a whole and women in our economy are massive.
Yeah. So I mean, that's just one example, really, of something that can be done. It's not something that's why I've invited you on the podcast, really, because we've been talking about things that us as individuals and business owners can do to make a difference. But the social intervention there, I guess, another option is the sharing of leave, paternity or maternity leave, where that's equal between the father and the mother.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, obviously that shared parental leave is
parental leave. That's the word I was looking for. So thank you.
But the thing is that the take up of that amongst men is really low, and I think the take up of it. I think it's a shame for new fathers that they don't feel that they're able to take that and share it equally with their female partners. But I think that they're worried about the things that women have had to face all these years of, it looks like I'm not interested in my career. My progression in my career may be stymied as a result of me taking this leave. Now, women have been having to face that forever. if they're in the work environment. I think that attitudes need to change, and I'm not blaming the men that decide not to take it. I'm not doing that at all, because they are subject to the attitudes that employers may have towards that, and their peers in the workplace. They may want to take that parental leave, but they have fears around how that might look, because culturally things haven't changed. But it is quite it's like a significant intervention that can be made. We should have done it years ago, but the uptake in it isn't as good as it can be. One of the things that I wanted to mention as well in terms of women in business is that the unconscious bias still plays a big part in it. And there's an unconscious bias towards men taking parental leave, their own unconscious bias of like, well, I can't do that. I mean, that's my wife's job, or that'll look bad if I take 6 months out. How I'm up for this promotion. How's that going to look, etc., etc., etc. And also, peer pressure from people going, God, I thought you were interested in your career. What are you taking leave for? All that kind of thing that we've had to face. But there's also unconscious bias in terms of decisions that are made around business support. So women-led businesses traditionally have not been able to access the same level of business support that's come from the likes of Scottish Enterprise or angel investors, whatever. So the government has set to commit to funding of 50 million over the course of this parliament. And they have brought in a female entrepreneur called Alice Stewart to do a review on business support and those systemic and unconscious bias related barriers that there are for women actually getting the public money and the public support, the public agency support that they have been lagging behind on when it comes to their male counterparts. So there's lots of different areas of this. A lot of it does come down to that unconscious bias, and sometimes conscious bias as well.
Yes, I'm looking for someone to come on the podcast and talk about unconscious bias. So if anyone's listening, I would love to approach me and have a chat about what that is and what we can do to make a change there. As a mother of teenagers, 2 boys and a girl, trying very hard to bring them up to think that everyone's equal, but there are obviously still a lot of other influences around their in their lives that can be are showing unconscious bias. And I'm probably not aware of all of it because it's unconscious, that there are probably things that I'm saying that's perpetuating that as well. We all do it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, I imagine there's lots of people that will be listening to this who will be able to talk about their experiences of the bias that they have experienced. But I genuinely think, I keep on coming back to this thing, if we don't tackle unconscious bias in the decision makers, they don't want to be blocking success. They don't want to be that. Their job, like for example, Scottish Enterprise, their job is to make Scotland as economically vibrant. They want to be tapping into the skills and potential of all business operators. But traditionally, it has meant that they want people who want to upscale really fast, that they want to have people who have got, ambitions of a turnover of millions within a short space of time. But a lot of women businesses want to be more sustainable. They don't want to be the kind of fast upscaling and then sell off and out of here type. They want to, what's important to quite a lot of women businesses that I've spoken about is about sustainability, is about making change, is about employing people and giving them a career pathway that is sustainable. It's not that boom time type attitude. And perhaps some of our business support systems don't recognize the value of sustainability over the rapid upscale.
Is it that down to the measure of success being jobs and money? And actually, when women get into business, their reason for doing it is maybe different, and so their goals are to provide a business that provides employment for themselves or for others who are in a similar situation, or the social responsibility. And if the measure of success is profit and taxes and jobs, their businesses don't fit that mold.
Yeah, I think there's
Yeah.
an awful lot in that. And I think in general, as a society, you'll see whenever like financial pages of any kind of newspaper will talk about GDP,
Mm-hmm.
over a well-being economy, over a sustainable economy, over a stable economy. I think there's everything's about growth, 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 growth. Everyone's looking for the next sky scanner or the next blue dog or but not recognizing the value of having sort of like small to medium-sized businesses that are sustainable and work and live in their community and be providing maybe even a relatively small amount of jobs, but have a big impact on that community. And Scotland is a country of SMEs. We have more SMEs than anything else, but this almost seems to be something that's mentioned in terms of that's a problem. That's a problem. Where are the big guys? Where are the big guys investing? Well, actually, lots and lots and lots of SMEs that are supported to grow at their own pace and are supported to take on modern apprentices, are supported to enter new markets at a rate and a pace that they want to and they're comfortable with is valuable. It's just as valuable as the Sky Scanners. I mean, I've mentioned Sky Scanner a couple of times, but they're now owned. They're not owned Scottish owned anymore.
Yeah.
Because they were tremendously successful very, very quickly, and then they got taken over, I think, by a Chinese company. So they no longer are a Scottish business. But the small to medium enterprises that are, steady employers that have, got profit that they're putting into the economy are just as valuable because they're multiple and accumulatively they are powering Scotland's economy, and they should be valued in the same way, and they should be supported. I mean, a colleague of mine, a former colleague of mine, often said we need to get away from this throwing money at people who are already successful.
Yes.
Throwing public money at people who think this sure thing because they've already shown success, and be willing to throw some money at some place might not upscale hugely, but are sustainable. It shouldn't be a measure of success that we have. We're not competing with Silicon Valley,
Mm-hmm.
We're not competing with the sort of like, the big multinationals. It's nice to have Scottish businesses, of course it is, that are trading worldwide. Of course it is, that are billions of turnover. Absolutely. The unicorns, I think they call them.
Yeah.
But just as valuable to us is the cumulative effect of the sustainable business model that doesn't get snapped up by foreign investors and taken away elsewhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So is there a change coming in terms of that, in terms of the support of these smaller businesses?
Well, I think there's certainly in the time that I have been in the Parliament, and I used to be in the Economy Committee, this has been mentioned then, and also we did some work around like gender pay gap as well, and looking at the benefits economically there was for that kind of more. I mean, you'll see the phrase well-being economy being mentioned now by government ministers, by people in that kind of sphere. That was never mentioned 5 years ago. The well-being economy, the sustainable economy. That was not a phrase that I had really heard until the last maybe 3-4 years. And there is that recognition that GDP and turnover is not the only barometer of success. Certainly, Kate Forbes, our finance secretary, is very clear on that. Nicola Sturgeon's very clear on that as well. The fact that Scotland has a lot of SMEs is not a failure on our part at all.
No.
In fact, it's a strength because you're sort of spreading your talent throughout lots and lots of vibrant businesses. And I think the pandemic as well has shown as well that people don't have to be in cities. People don't have to be in Glasgow and Edinburgh in order to be successful. you can be setting up, particularly with the rollout of more broadband in the rural areas. And also this thing of like having businesses that have local products and use local ingredients or suppliers for that provenance around things has a greater respect, I think, and a greater value than it ever did before. So yeah, I think there is a recognition that sort of like GDP is only one measurement and it's not the be all and end all. It's good to have a lot of money going into the Scottish economy. Of course it is, but there are other ways of doing that rather than the fast scale up.
I would add to that like within a business, within an SME, within the kind of businesses that I work with as a business coach, the well-being of the people in the business will help with the generation of the turnover and the profit.
Absolutely.
When you look after the people and these people are happy and healthy and all, mental health and everything, the work-life balance and all of that, when that's in place for the people who are the most valuable resource in most businesses, that then feeds the turnover and the profit, the financial success of the business as well.
And it takes away the overheads of having to replace people. So I mean,
yes,
you've rightly said that people are your greatest asset. And when people decide that they don't want to stay with a company and move on, effectively the investment you've had in that person in terms of training them, customers knowing them, having those relationships, the recruitment costs of getting someone else and starting that process again are absolutely massive. And not being able to identify why that person has left or is leaving until it's too late is a cost to your business. Whereas if you'd had the kind of culture where somebody could say to you, I'll give the example, I know it's a long time ago, but I did work for a production company and I left because I didn't feel the work was flexible enough. I didn't feel valued enough. I didn't feel that I knew for the fact that my male counterparts were earning more money than I was. I left after asking for that to be rectified, and it wasn't. In fact, I was spoken to in quite a patronising way, and they lost me. They lost me, and although they maybe just thought, well, she was asking for too much, whatever. If they had turned around and said, well, how can we make you feel more valued? What can we do? What can I do with your flexible working? Since you've got a young family, what's the kind of work? Where do you see, if you were to stay here, what would you see yourself doing in like 2-3 years' time? How can we facilitate that, et cetera, et cetera? I might not have been so worried about the salary.
Yes.
Yeah. So if there was all that stuff saying, well, we really value you and we want to keep you and, we want to make sure that all your talents are used, but in a way that's not going to drive you into the ground. I might not have been sat across my manager gurning about the fact that I wasn't getting paid enough. I probably would have thought, well, I'm not going to get this kind of like deal anywhere else. I like working here. I think they respect me. I'll stay. And then they wouldn't have to recruit other people. So it makes perfect sense. If profit and loss is your only motivator as an MD, then I think you can make that argument that having that attention to someone's well-being and having the respect for them and their general happiness within your employee, then you could actually put a figure against that. If that's your only motivator, you can put a figure against that because someone leaves and you have to start from scratch again with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't learn from what you did wrong with that other person that left, then the same thing's going to happen with umpteen of your employees. And you're constantly going to have this expensive cycle of recruitment.
So what can we do as individuals to help to bring about as the change to the gender balance in business ownership, do you think, Gillian?
Well, I feel very strongly that women helping other women is the way through this. And that's, I mentioned earlier that we do the cross-party group in Women in Enterprise. And what we try to do with that is that in everything that we do, we'll have our sort of formal meeting, we'll have our presentations, we'll have our discussions. But one of the things that's very important to me is the bit afterwards. It's the bit afterwards where you're not just sat around the table anymore. We're having a cup of tea and a bit of a chat, and we don't call it networking, but that's what it is. And that support and that recognition of the fact that, people in that room will know what you're going through and will be able to give you advice, but doing it in an informal way. So that women helping other women, having groups like Women's Enterprise Scotland, having all these different kind of voices that see the importance of women in enterprise and these supportive networks, but not calling them networks, because networking is something that sounds like men in a golf course.
It does, doesn't it? Yes. Uh-huh.
And I have to say that I never, in the however many years, and what was it? Gosh, it would have been 15 years of running my own business. I never went to a networking event, never, because these sort of things give me the fear, and they just make me, frankly, come out in hives, the thought of them, because it does sound like a male dominated thing, and it just sounds like the sort of thing that's not my bag. But would I have gone along to something which was talking about, women in enterprise or small business owners, evening or whatever, hearing from females that had successful businesses, or some less kind of formal sounding? Would I have gone along to something like that? Yeah, I might have, or would I have, had a kind of an informal chat with other people in my sort of situation. And I think it's easier now that we're used to using things like Zoom and whatever. I would be more likely to sort of like get involved in that. And I think it's almost like that soft kind of intervention of, and that's how you build up your own contacts. And it isn't contacts in terms of people in a kind of really formal way, but it's having that person on the end, and on the end of the phone, you're thinking, oh, so I know so-and-so went to get funding for X. I'm going to phone her up and see how she got on. I'm going to just have that chat with her. I'm going to go for lunch with her, or I'm going to, I'll bump into her at something. I'll go and gravitate and have that. Women supporting other women is absolutely invaluable. And just passing on knowledge, advice in that kind of less formal way is hugely, hugely valuable. And if you are a woman that's running a business and you're employing people, then have a think back as to why you set that business up in the first place and what it was that made you decide not to work for someone else, and what you wanted your workplace culture to be like that you didn't like when you were employed by someone else, and lead by example in that and advocate for it amongst your other business owning colleagues, and everything that we've talked about today. Live that by example, but also shout from the rooftops as to why it works.
Because it does work. Absolutely.
It does work.
Yeah. Here we are. Yeah. Well, Gillian, I'm very aware that we have a limited amount of time. I could talk to you all day about these issues, share your experiences. I'd just like to thank you so much for being on. I usually ask everyone at the end if there's anything that I should have asked you that I haven't asked, or anything that you'd like to add.
Gosh. I'm not sure, but I suppose a good question would be, if I wasn't in politics, would I still be running my business? And what would my business look like, I suppose? And I think about that quite a lot. And I think about, particularly over the last couple of years during the pandemic, I've thought, what situation would I have been in? If I wouldn't have been particularly eligible maybe for furlough. How would I have adapted my business to deal and survive over the pandemic? And I don't really have an answer for that, but it does weigh on me heavily, because I might not have been in the situation of being elected. And I guess that's something that drives me forward in terms of like working with the women that I do that own businesses that have had to come through the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Putting yourself in their shoes and thinking, gosh, I could have been in a situation where all of a sudden everything stopped. I wasn't able to get in a helicopter to go offshore. I wasn't able to go into places with my camera operator and film things. How would I have adapted? What would my business look like? So I'm not even giving you an answer to the question. I suppose I'm just posing the question. It's in my mind. It's always on my mind. I haven't left my business head behind. I do think about that sliding doors thing.
I think that's a real benefit to us as women in business, that you, with that mindset, are where you are, where you know there's an opportunity to help to make changes, that you're looking at the pandemic experience from your previous experience means that you can look at it from our perspective. So, and I think we're very lucky to have that.
Well, thank you
to have you
much.
in that role. Whatever our politics are, to have people like you going from business to politics and taking that experience and that voice for the rest of us.
It's important. It's important to me. Politicians often can be looked upon as being people that just arrived out of a closet, fully formed politicians, and that's all they ever were. But actually, in the Scottish Parliament in particular, there's lots of people that have had other lives as well, and I think that makes politics all the richer. And we forget our past experiences at our peril.
And that would be a lesson that I would want to tell everyone, that your past experiences are of value wherever you are and whatever role you're taking, and whether you're previously employed, whether a mother, everything adds up to who you are today.
Absolutely. There's no qualification. Value. There's no qualification for getting into politics. The only qualification is, people electing you, and nothing that you've ever been through in your life is a waste of your time. That a wee plug for more women to get into politics on that basis,
or business. The argument's the same, isn't it?
Business.
Yeah. Gillian, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being on the Scale Her Up podcast.
Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thanks for listening to Scale Her Up, the Female Entrepreneurs Show. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and please join our Facebook community at Scale Her Up. Please connect with me, Brenda Hector, on social media and drop me a message to let me know you're enjoying the podcasts, or even better, pop a wee review on iTunes. I'm going to finish by reminding you, only 1 in 3 UK entrepreneurs are female, and men are 5 times more likely to scale their business to over 1 million in turnover than women. If we started and scaled our businesses to the same extent as men, it would add 250 billion to the UK economy and provide millions of jobs. Ladies, you can do it, and we're going to make a massive difference.